Let's go upstairs. Let me take my time. Let me give you a very brief introduction before we start the tour. So from the top, I want us to end the tour at the door of no return. So we go upstairs, see what happened up there. The residence of the governor, the auction house, the church on top of the male dungeon. And when you come back, I'm going to take you to the male dungeon, the male condemned cell, the 4 identified graves, the female punishment cell, the door of no return. And we are going to come back through the door of no return. So for now, let's go to the auction house. Obviously, let's go back before the tour begins. Let's go.
Even the craftsmen in Europe could not even make west the Nigeria. All the animals still exist. So most of these things are in the
slave dungeon. My name is Tony. It is a dungeon. European slave traders built 3 slave dungeons in the whole of West Africa. All the 3 slave dungeons Europeans built in West Africa are all located in Ghana. These 3 slave dungeons are El Mina slave dungeon, Osu slave dungeon, and Cape Coast slave dungeon. The Portuguese built the El Mina slave dungeon in 1482. The Danes established Osu slave dungeon in 1661, and the British constructed Cape Coast slave dungeon in 1664. But these 3 slave dungeons were actually built by the Africans. They used the Africans to build this. But the major difference between Cape Coast slave dungeon and El Mina slave dungeon is that El Mina slave dungeon was built not for the purposes of the Transatlantic slave. This one, Cape Coast slave dungeon, was established by the British for the slave trade. So today's dungeons I'm going to show you are real slave dungeons that were built in 1664. I like to use this wall as an imaginary map. Okay, before the Europeans came, our ancestors did not have the kind of countries that we have today, like Nigeria, Mali, Burkina Faso, Senegal, Ghana. No. They had different tribes, which had different jurisdictions, and they are all speaking different languages. So before the Europeans came, the Africans were already fighting against each other. The empires, the kingdoms, the tribes, the chiefdom were already fighting against each other. But the Africans were not practicing slavery. We were practicing what you call servitude. There's a difference between servitude and slavery. Now in servitude, servants could keep their names, they could marry, they could have children, they could even inherit the properties of their masters. But when the Europeans came, they brought the idea of slave trade. Now the first Europeans to come here were the Portuguese. But before the Portuguese came, the first group of people to come to Africa were the Arabs. The Arabs came across a desert we call Sahara Desert. They came for gold, ivory, spices, and many Africans. However, the Arabs castrated all the African men they took to the Middle East. The reason was because they didn't want black people to reproduce over there. It was around that same time that the Arabs were trading with the Europeans. They were giving the Europeans, they were stealing from the Africans. So it got to a point where the Europeans wanted to know where the Arabs were getting the gold from. The first intruders, the first Europeans to come to West Africa were the Portuguese. The Portuguese got to an island we call Cape Verde. They were searching for gold, so they kept navigating and eventually got to Ghana in 1471. Now, it was around 1482 that the Portuguese decided to build the Elmina slave castle. Now, when the Portuguese got to Elmina, because they discovered that Elmina had a lot of gold, they decided to name that part El Mine. El Mine is a Portuguese word which means the mine or the land of gold. So in 1482, the Portuguese built that slave castle, dungeon, in order to store the gold they were getting from the Africans. So look, Elmina Castle was built in 1482, and Christopher Columbus claimed he discovered the Americas in 1492. So you see the difference. Now, when the Europeans discovered the Americas, they realized that they could cultivate sugar cane to produce sugar. So they became very aggressive. They began forcing the Native Americans as cheap labors. But due to the fact that the Europeans were introducing many diseases that killed the Native Americans, there was a Catholic priest called Bartolomeu de las Casas. He recommended that, he was trying to Christianize the Native Americans, but he realized that the Native Americans was trying to Christianize, were dying. So Bartolomeu de las Casas began protecting these Native Americans against the Europeans. But Bartolomeu de las Casas recommended that the Europeans should come from West Africans to the Americas, that the Africans are very strong people. And that was the genesis of the transatlantic slave trade. Now, European culture focuses on three things: prudence, privilege, and power. The African culture also focuses on three things: mutual relationship, respect, and values. Now, when you take prudence, privilege, and power, it gives you four things: white supremacy, indoctrination, mass incarceration, and weapons of mass destruction. I'm going to show you. These are the cannonballs and cannons out. Those were the weapons of mass destruction. So they brought them here for those things to happen. But is it true that the Africans sold their people to the Europeans? What actually happened? We need to expatiate on the reason why the Africans brought the enslaved Africans to the European slave traders. Now, when the Europeans came, from the beginning, they themselves were kidnapping the Africans along the coast of West Africa. Because the Europeans realized that West Africans were defending themselves, so they began employing into the West African region destructive weapons, gun and gunpowder, in order to cause confusion and instigate wars amongst the Africans. So there were many Africans, tribes, empires, chiefs accepted these weapons. Now, when you talk about the when you talk about the involvement of the Africans, we also need to focus on the resistance of the Africans. Some Africans refused to get these weapons, but it was very difficult because the Europeans conditioned the region to a level that if you don't have these weapons, those who have them will kill you and take over your family and your relatives. So the Africans began seeking from these weapons from the Europeans, but the conditions the Europeans gave them was to bring them people. How do you get them? You have to go out there, kidnap different tribes from different jurisdictions and bring them here. Where we are is called Palava. Palava is the Portuguese word which means to negotiate, to bargain. In other words, it means conflict. This was the auction house of the slave castle. There were many tables here, but our tables in these chairs are all recent ones. On the tables which used to be here with items such as clothing items, red wine, gunpowder, sugar, tobacco, and many more. So the African slave traders who used to work for and with the British traders will bring the enslaved Africans here to the British slave traders for transactions to take place. Now, after the enslaved Africans were brought here, the British traders will examine them and check their eyes and teeth to make sure they were strong. The reason why they were interested in identifying the strength of the Africans was to determine their worth. And right after that, to ask the African slave traders what they wanted on the table. Do you want that? Do you want this? You just give it to them and take the enslaved Africans from there. For easy identification, the British traders had irons. We call them branded iron. On the branded iron were the names or the initials of the British traders. Before the Africans to the continent, put the branded irons in fire and put it on the chest, the back, or the arm of the enslaved Africans for easy identification. And right after that, the African men were taken to the male slave dungeon and the African women to the female slave dungeons. In a male dungeon at Cape Coast Slave Castle were as many as 1,000 enslaved African men. In a female slave dungeon were as many as 500 enslaved African women. The major reason why the British, the French, the Dutch, the Portuguese were shipping off the African women was because they could reproduce. They could multiply in their numbers. And when an African woman gives birth, that child becomes a property. And one of the major reasons why these Europeans did not treat the Africans as people or human beings was the fact that there were some insurance companies that were selling insurance policies to the slave owners. I know 2 insurance policies who are still in operation. New York Life, Lawrence. New York Life Insurance Company, US Life Insurance Company. So they were selling insurance policies to the slave owners. And when a slave dies, these insurance companies will compensate them. And New York Life is big today. They are making a lot of money. Yeah, boys. US Life, you know Barclays Bank? They made a lot of money. They were financing the plantation. Over 40% of the total population of the Africans were taken by the Portuguese. But the Portuguese normally transported the Africans to Brazil. That is why Brazil has a very large population of black people. But the media keeps showing the light-skinned Africans. But there are many outside the African continent. Brazil has the largest black population in the whole world. But I'd like to take you to the other part. We've not started the tour. I'm just showing you around. Let's see the residence of the governor, the church, the cannonballs, the cannons. Let me just show you around. When you are done with how they were living, I'll show you how they made us live in the dungeons. Any questions, please?
No.
Please come on.
These things are well made, you know, man. They were well made.
Still stand up.
Hundreds of years we bought them for this cannonball with this thing.
Now, can you all see the cannonballs and cannons? And these were the weapons. You know, I made mention of weapons of mass destruction. So this is part of this. You know, don't let anyone tell you that the Africans never fought back. It's a lie. It's a fallacy.
The Africans never what?
Never fought back. It's a lie. Do not let anyone tell you that the Africans never resisted. It's a lie. It's a fallacy.
Some of them.
Why did they bring these weapons in the first place? Now, you see these cannonballs behind you. Those cannons were meant to prevent the Africans who tried to take over the slave castle. And those there were meant to prevent the other Europeans who tried to take over the castle. The Ashantis from the Ashanti region had 5 series of wars against the British. The Ashantis successfully killed one of the British governors called Charles McCarthy. They beheaded him. They took off his head. Now, there's no cement in this building. The walls you see is not made of cement. This is made of lime, oyster shells from the ocean, they grind them. That is what they used to build this slave castle. So there's a phenomenon behind this wall called the breeding walls. Now, when water enters on a surface, cement absorbs the water. Oyster shells, lime put together allow the water to penetrate through them and evaporate on the other surface. So no matter how many times you paint it, because the walls breathe, they are going to look old. You see,
Just like that.
all that the breathing walls. I just want to see how heavy these things are. These are not the actual size. They were big, and they had holes in them. So they put gunpowder in the holes, put them in the cans and fire. And the sound of just one bolt scared
You need to fold it properly. Fold it.
to 10,000.
You want to try? Come. Try that. You know exactly.
Use your two hands. So you can give your phone to her.
Give me a phone.
Use your two hands, please.
Oh my. See, Grace?
Turn around.
Heavy.
You hold it. Hold this.
Careful,
Huh?
careful.
Come.
Watch your tongue.
It's not in Port Royal.
Yeah, but this one's different. I know Port Royal ones was
This is Africa.
round.
Oh my God. This is heavy.
Thank you.
Let me take it to the other side.
Wow.
I wonder how far these shoot. Let's take a picture, guys. I'm gonna have to shift because of this.
Let's stand. Look across the ocean at the far end. Can you see there's a peninsula? You see the peninsula?
Yeah,
That's
yeah, yeah.
Elmina.
That's Elmina.
Yeah, that's where Elmina Slave Castle is. The biggest and the oldest slave castle. That slave castle is 541 years old. Cape Coast Slave Castle is only 358 years old. I'm using only because that slave castle is almost 200 years older than this one.
Wonderful.
But that doesn't mean this is not old. It's very old. It's the biggest. Now, that's the Atlantic Ocean, the same ocean that is connected to the West Indies. Historically, there are 4 oceans: Pacific, Atlantic, Indian, and Arctic. But it's the same ocean that is connected to the West Indies.
To the West Indies. Same one.
And that's the residence of the government. Can you see it? That's the highest floor. White supremacy. It's above everybody.
Hey, I'm starting Africa. Sad.
It's above everybody. Racism is not real. It's not there. You need to condition your mindset to think you're superior to somebody else. It's not there. But you need to do something, to show that I'm better than somebody. You need to feed your mindset with something different. So that's a way of conditioning their mindset that we're on top of everybody.
So why does the whites decide that they want to come here to
Why?
take a look? Why do they come here to take a look?
They were already here. They were already a long time. They came. The competition was between the Arabs and the Europeans. As part of our history, Africans have never been interested in colonizing somebody else. because God gave us everything: gold, oil,
Everything.
potential, skills, everything. The ocean. So we don't bother ourselves.
Think about it.
No.
Okay.
So when they came here and they saw the gold, they got crazy. There was gold everywhere. Did you know Ghana was known as the Gold Coast?
Yes.
There was gold everywhere. So because of the gold, they had to tap into the resources that we had.
Okay.
And today they classify it as third world countries. But you came for our gold. You stole our people. Europe and America were both built by Africans. They took the Africans from here. The gold on the throne, in their palaces were from this place.
Yes. Yes. Somebody want to take me for a visit? Give me that.
The floor that is original. The wood, because of the ocean, the moisture of the ocean, so we do change them. The windows and doors are not original. Some of the woods are very good, so they are still good. But many of them are changed. So these are reception. You can see the place is very nice. That's the bedroom and the living room. I'll take you to the bedroom and the living room. But these are reception. Not every African was enslaved. Some Africans who were with and for them were classified as privileged. So some of them will come here. You can't just go to the residence of the government. You need to meet with them. So you come and discuss business. I'll give you that. I'll give you this. And we just come up with an agreement, and we can fulfill the agreement that we've initiated. But I need to show you something in the communication mode. Okay. Now, so the British built the backup. So the slave castle is there. This is a slave castle. We are at the slave castle, the Cape of Slave Castle. But they built two backups, Fort William and Fort Victoria, to serve as observational eyes, to see everything that is going on closer to this one. I made mention of the competition, the Dutch, the French, even the Africans tried to take over the castle in order to free the people. But the other Europeans wanted to take over to continue their atrocities. So let me show you the communication of this. We call this communication, bro. Whatever you see here is still real. Everything based on history, whatever you see has already happened, and it's still happening. And it's happening in order for them to still be in power. So the reason why the light-skinned children were not treated like the dark-skinned Africans was the fact that the British wanted to identify them. They wanted to separate them. They wanted to give them better treatment. So they used the dark-skinned Africans in order to differentiate dark-skinned Africans. So the light-skinned Africans were not enslaved people. There's a church here at Cape of Slave Castle on top of the male slave dungeon. Eventually, that same church was used as a school to educate the light-skinned children. It was not education, it was indoctrination. So they conditioned the mindset of the light-skinned children to think they were superior, they were better than this. So even when the Europeans were not there, they were absent, the dark skin was still being pressured. I'm talking about psychological. No, you are not part of this. You are light, you are dark, you are not part of us. So light skin privilege and colorism started here before it started in the USA. Long before. And do you know that the last slave ship to leave for the USA was in 1860? Very recent.
Very recent.
1860 was the last one. So communication room, when you look through this window, look up there on the hill, you see a fort. We call that Fort William. It's like a lighthouse. It was a fort built to protect Cape Coast Castle. So in case the Dutch, the French try to attack the British slaveholders here across the ocean, those British army officers, they could see them coming, so they'll wave flags to let them know that someone is coming. Just take a look, you know what I'm talking
There's a fort in Bamboo, right?
about. Yes. There are many, in Ghana there are about 40 of them.
Yeah, there's one in Bamboo.
We have William, Fort William,
Oh, see, it's right up on top.
Sebastian, we have Amsterdam, we have Netta Cross, we have Fort St. Jago, we have Fort Victoria. There's a lot of them. There's a lot of them.
Straight there.
But this place is the residence of the British government. The residence of the government. Where there is a living room, and that is the bedroom of the government. The living room has 9 windows. The bedroom has 5 windows. In totality, there are 14 windows for just one person. The air is fresh, the views are amazing. Can you see it? Can you feel it?
I can feel it.
It's a difference.
It doesn't need a fan.
And I want you to also pay attention to the signs of the windows. Can you see them?
Mm-hmm.
The dungeons will shock you because they are not proper dungeons. They are not proper windows. They're only small holes for ventilation and light.
And this is what he had. This is what he had, eh?
Yeah, that's William. Can you see it?
The one on top, eh?
Yeah, the one on top, the small one. But apart from the Fort William, you see there are some structures closer to a slave castle and churches. Can you see them?
Yes.
Yeah. So the one there with the green roof, the green rooftop is the Methodist church. And can you see the other one which has the Jesus on it? At the far end on the hill, the church with the red roof top. That's the Catholic church. And the other one closer to the slave castle. You see there's a one closer to the slave castle.
Yes.
That's an
Yeah.
Anglican church. Anglican church began here. And the name of the Anglican church during the slave trade era is called Society for the Propagation of the Gospel. It is now Anglican Church, Church of England. And that's the oldest Methodist church in Ghana, the one with the roof, green roof. The oldest Methodist church in Ghana. We call it Wesley Methodist Church. Built in 1835.
1835. Yeah, really.
So let me show you the church on top of the mill building. Yeah, I made mention of two forks. Let me show you the other one. Look, on a hill out there. Can you see it?
Yes.
We call it Victoria. So we saw William, and that's Victoria. We built these two forks. So that's the communication room for Fort Victoria. We look through this window. And you see it clear.
Straight. Yeah. So instead of using binoculars, you could just use.
Can you see it?
Yeah. Yeah, it makes it directly. Wow. This is where the big boy will sit down, you know?
Let's see the church. That is the church.
This?
The church we saw.
Okay.
You know, I made mention of a church. That's the church. And this is a hole we saw in the middle. We've not been to the middle dungeon. So the British Christians would worship, they'll preach, they'll pray, they'll come and stand right here and look at what is happening in the middle dungeon. This is the part that we do not get to understand. Why was the church built on top of people who were struggling to survive? It doesn't make sense. Now, I have not come across theories that explain the reason why the church was built on top of the male slave dungeon. But I do believe that they built the church on top of the male slave dungeon in order to oppress the energy of the 1,000 men, to keep them down completely. You know, I told you racism is not real, it's not there. But you need to condition your mindset to think that you're better, to think you're superior to somebody else. So this was part of the process. So they were conditioning their mindset, you know, to believe that they were in heaven already, and the Africans were in hell. They were saved people closer to God, and the Africans were unsaved people in hell. So they have the right to preach the gospel. This is part of the spiritual warfare.
Okay.
Please come. Let's see the middle dungeon, please. Wow. Barack Obama was here July 2009. The major reason why the Obamas came to his slave castle is because his wife, Michelle Obama, knows very well that her ancestors came to this place. So the family came here July 2009 in order to honor the ancestors who died in the dungeons. That's a church on top of the male slave dungeon. The name of the church again is Society for the Propagation of the Gospel, today known as the Anglican Church, Church of England. There's a plaque right here. Let's come closer. I need to expatiate on this one. In everlasting memory of the anguish of our ancestors, may those who died rest in peace. May those who return find their roots. May humanity never again perpetuate such injustice against humanity. We the living vow to uphold this. In 1992, this was posted here by the National House of Chiefs. On their behalf is to apologize for some of the roles their predecessors played in the transatlantic slave trade. But the most importantly, this flag focuses on is to keep reminding the living ones today. It is everyone's responsibility to make sure what happened nearly 500 years ago does not repeat itself. And it is our job to make sure we do the injustice. We have to come together. Let's promote self-education, black education, and unity amongst black people. But I'm going to take you to the male dungeon. The floor that leads to the male dungeon is very slippery. So you take your time, you walk slowly. Please. No sunglasses needed in the male slave dungeon. Please come closer. You come right here where I'm standing. Yes. Now let's come closer. Watch your steps. Watch your steps. Let's come back here.
If it one doesn't
Is that a J?
So this was is the male dungeon. Now the male slave dungeon comprises of 5 chambers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In each one of them were 200 enslaved African men. So we're 200 men here. That was a capacity. That was a maximum. It could be less than that. Or it could be about 200 men. But 200 was the maximum. So about 200 men in the first, about 200 men in the second, 200 in the third, fourth, and fifth chamber. So that means we're about 1,000 men in the male slave dungeon. This is where the African men eat, sleep, defecate, lie on the floor. The trench was to flush out their feces and urine, and there was a massive influx of mosquitoes in here. This place was like that. There was no light in this. On top of the male dungeon, the British built a church we call Society for the Propagation of the Gospel. And the British Army officers would have been here in Fishland. The African men were very strong. So because of that, the British call them strongholds to bring them in the first chamber. Now there are 6 holes. Let's stand up and I'll show you something like that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or so. So we'll make sure to change some of the men to shadow the chamber. Above these 6 holes is a bigger hole. Can you see it?
Yeah.
We call that hole the mouth or the ear of the slave castle. It was through that hole that the British slave holders would know everything that was going on here. In case the African men tried to break off the doors, the noise would just pass through that hole out. But I'm going to put the light out so you can see how this place looked like. Let's go on, please. I want you to touch the wall like this.
dungeon. This is still blood in it. There's still blood in it. Still blood and feces, this one. Right where you see that, so it still has shit and piss and blood. Same thing from my ancestors.
For engineers, you know?
Can you see the trench? Now, look at the floor. You see the floor is sloping.
Yeah.
So the waste of those in the first chamber gets in the second. So from the first to the second to the third, fourth, fifth, and eventually gets in the ocean. And you know the floor with half naked. When you come here around 8, 9, 10 p.m., you see a lot of cockroaches on the floor. So that means they have to do that. The British built the church. Our home is connected to the church, so they would worship, they would preach, they would stand right there, and that was happening in the middle of the slave dungeon. This is the pattern of the understand. Why was the church built on top of the slave? It's strange. I need to show you something short before we see the last change. Now, look at the floor of the first change. Can you see bricks? You see bricks there in the first. You can see bricks in the second. Neither can you in the third, fourth, and fifth. Listen. Can you see this? Bricks. Now, the original floor of the male slave dungeon is made of bricks. Okay, and the bricks that I'm touching is the floor. This dark floor is not part of the floor. We were supposed to be seeing bricks all over. We were supposed to be walking on bricks. But because there's been millions of African men here, this is where they were eating, sleeping, defecating, dying. So their blood, feces, and the food eventually piled up to become this dark floor.
So we're standing on
Defecation, blood,
All this dark floor contains the DNA of the enslaved Africans.
that's about me must like them, say.
Now, the reason why
So why me must like them?
The reason why we get to see the floor, the bricks, the first chamber, is because in 1974, a group of archaeologists came here in 1974. They went to the first chamber. They took their time to excavate the floor of the first chamber to Accra for further investigation. That is when they found out that the floor contains the DNA, the food, and the listen, there's a small cell, right? A cell, a very small cell. That cell is a sick cell. You know, many African men got very big and sick. Not all of them were able to survive the conditions here. So those who were sick were held there to die. And after they died, their bodies were disposed in the ocean. They didn't bury them. Because according to the Europeans, the Africans were not human beings. But the same people who claim the Africans were not human beings were making babies with the African women in the female dungeons. Before what we are all standing is a shrine. And this is part of what we call the West African traditional spirituality. But this shrine we see here used to be here long before the construction of the slave castle began. But when the Europeans came, the shrine was taken to a different place. It was after the abolition that the shrine was brought back to its original location. There was a big town, a very big town right here. All the African men in the male slave dungeon were chained, shackled, and forced to walk through the tunnel to the door we call the door of no return for shipment. Now, this tunnel was blocked off in 1833 or 1834 to officially mark the abolition. And these were brought here by visitors in order to pay respect to the ancestors who died in the dungeons. Any questions, please? Aisha, let's take a look there. There's no exit, but just take a look and let's continue. We have a lot of stairs to see. We have a lot of stairs to see.
So when they die,
And the sick.
when they're sick and they die,
But then, they're sick for the sick to die, and after they die, they just
take him off.
to the ocean. Just a minute.